The stars outside shimmered like endless silver dust, dancing in the black sea of space. Princess Virel of Lither Prime stood by the wide crystal window of her chamber, her reflection faint against the galaxy's glow. She looked proud and calm, her long white hair flowing like moonlight, her violet eyes watching the cold stars that never answered her questions. Behind her, she could feel his eyes again, quiet, steady, unblinking, the human. His name was Ethan Cole, a soldier from Earth assigned as her personal guard after the war between humans and Litheri ended. Peace had come, but it was a fragile peace. Both sides had lost too much. Virel had agreed to live among humans as a symbol of unity, but she had never expected to be guarded by one. For weeks he followed her silently. In the royal halls, in the gardens, even during the council meetings. Always watching. Always there. He did not speak unless spoken to. He stood tall in his black uniform marked with Earth's crest, his expression calm but unreadable. At first she found it insulting. What did this fragile creature think he was doing? Did he believe she needed protection? She, a Lithari, born with the power of energy manipulation, trained in battle, heir to an empire older than human civilization itself. But over time, something strange began to happen. The silence between them no longer felt like mere duty. It felt heavier. Every time she turned, his eyes followed her, not with arrogance or fear, but with something she could not name. Respect? Curiosity? Sorrow? It began to bother her. One night, unable to bear the quiet any longer, Virel turned suddenly from the window. Her voice broke the still air. "Why do you keep watching me, human?" she demanded. Her tone was sharp, filled with pride and confusion. "Do you think I will run away? Or betray your people?" Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't even move his hand toward his weapon. He just looked at her with those calm gray eyes that always seemed to hold something deeper than words. "No, Your Highness," he said softly. "I watch because—" "You look lonely," Virel froze. The words struck her like a blade made of truth. She wanted to shout, to deny it, but her voice caught in her throat. Her heart, trained for years to be cold and distant, stuttered for the first time in ages. Lonely. She was the princess of a dying empire. Her people blamed her for choosing peace over victory. Her palace was now filled with humans who did not understand her ways, her silence, her pain. She had no friends here. Only duty. And now this human, this fragile soldier, was telling her the one truth she had buried deep inside. She turned away quickly, her face hard again. "You speak too freely," she said coldly. "Maybe," Ethan replied, his tone gentle. "But someone has to." The silence returned, but it was no longer cold. It was heavy with meaning. Virel's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them behind her back. She did not know why her heart beat faster when he spoke. For the rest of the night, neither of them moved. She stood by the window, pretending to watch the stars. He stood near the door, pretending to guard. But their thoughts tangled between them like invisible threads. Virel didn't understand it yet, but something had changed that night. A small crack had appeared in the wall around her heart. A wall that had stood since the war, since the loss, since her people had turned their eyes away from her. She hated that a human was the one to cause it. Yet deep inside, where even she could not see, she wondered what it would mean if he was right. Lonely. The word echoed through her mind long after the lights dimmed and the stars faded into silence. For the first time in years, the Princess of Lither could not sleep. And somewhere behind her, the human who dared to speak the truth kept his quiet watch. Not as a guard, but as someone who finally saw her for what she truly was. Not a ruler. Not an alien, just someone lost among the stars. After that night, something shifted between them, something neither of them could explain. The princess no longer shouted when she caught him watching. The human no longer looked away when she met his gaze. The silence between them became softer, almost thoughtful. Yet both of them pretended nothing had changed. Princess Virel still carried herself like royalty, calm, graceful, untouchable. She walked through the marble halls of the human embassy on Lither Prime, her silver robe gliding over the floor like mist. But deep inside, her heart carried the heavy echo of that single word Ethan had said: lonely. She hated that he had seen through her so easily. No one ever dared to speak to her like that. Not her advisors, not her people, not even her family. But this human soldier, with his calm eyes and quiet strength, had spoken the truth she had buried for years. She started noticing things about him now. The way he stood at attention even when exhausted, the way he spoke politely to every alien servant, even those who glared at him, the way his hand sometimes clenched when he saw the scars on his arm, marks left from the war she had been part of. Humans were strange, she thought. Fragile yet stubborn, weak yet fierce. Their emotions ran wild, but they never hid them. They laughed, cried, shouted, and still kept moving forward. One evening, Virel found him outside in the garden. It was a quiet place filled with glowing litheri flowers that floated in the air like tiny stars. Ethan was sitting on the stone bench, his helmet beside him, staring at the twin moons above. "You should not be alone," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Says the one who spends her nights talking to the stars." She frowned, though a small smile tugged at her lips. "Humans always have answers, don't they?" "Not always," he said. "Sometimes we just pretend we do." Virel sat beside him. The silence between them stretched again, but this time it felt peaceful. After a while she asked, "Why do humans fight so much? And yet talk of peace?" Ethan took a slow breath before answering. "Because we learn peace the hard way. We lose everything first, then we understand how precious it is." His words carried pain, quiet but deep. Virel turned to look at him, noticing the faint scar near his jaw. "You lost someone?" He nodded slightly. "My brother. He was in the First Fleet when the war started. I joined to make sure it ended." Her heart tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He gave a faint smile. "You don't need to be. Maybe if people like you and me can understand each other, others won't have to go through the same." Virel looked down at her hands. "My people call me a coward for choosing peace. They say I betrayed our blood." "Then they're wrong," Ethan said firmly. "Choosing peace is harder than fighting." His words warmed something inside her, a small light she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she saw him not as a guard, not as a soldier, but as a person. Someone who carried pain just like her, someone who understood what it meant to lose. The moons above them drifted across the night sky, bathing the garden in pale light. Virel turned her head slightly, watching his calm expression. There was no arrogance in him, no fear, just a steady, quiet strength that made her feel less alone. "Tell me about your world," she said suddenly. Ethan smiled a little. "Earth, it's messy, loud, beautiful. We have oceans that stretch forever, skies that change color when the sun rises, and rain." "Rain," she repeated. "It's water that falls from the sky," he explained. "Cold and soft. It smells fresh, like a new beginning." Virel closed her eyes, trying to imagine it. The sound, the feel, the smell. "It sounds alive." "It is," Ethan said quietly. "It's home." That night when Virel returned to her room, she couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't because of loneliness. It was because she kept hearing his words, seeing his eyes, and imagining a world where the sky itself wept in beauty. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered what it would feel like to stand in the rain with him, under a sky that healed instead of hurt. For the first time, the Princess of Lither dreamed not of stars or wars, but of Earth, and of the human who spoke to her heart as no one ever had. The next few weeks passed quietly, but peace rarely lasted long. Princess Virel had begun to speak to Ethan more often, small questions about Earth, short comments during meals, quiet walks through the garden at dusk. For the first time since the war ended, she felt almost Normal, but the palace did not like normal. The palace wanted distance, rules, and control. Whispers began to spread among the Lithari nobles. Some said the princess had grown too close to her human guard. Others called it disgraceful. They said she was forgetting her blood, her pride, her people. The cruel words reached her sooner than she expected. One morning, when she entered the council chamber, she froze. Someone had burned words into the polished wall with plasma fire. The message glowed faintly, still warm. Human lover. You betrayed the Lithar blood. Her breath caught. The guard stood in uneasy silence, afraid to look at her. The shame, the fury, the pain, all mixed into one heavy silence. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan. He stopped when he saw the wall, his jaw tightening. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, his gray eyes calm but dark with anger. They're getting bolder, he said finally. She turned to him, her voice sharp. Because of you. The words came out before she could stop them. The sound of them hung in the air like poison. Ethan didn't react. He didn't argue. He just stood there silent, like a wall that refused to fight back. If I'm the problem, he said quietly, I'll ask for reassignment. Her chest tightened. The thought of him leaving made something cold spread through her. No, she said quickly, softer now. You will stay. He nodded once, respectful as always. But his eyes were distant now, and for the first time the silence between them hurt. That night Varel sat in her room staring at her reflection. The words on the wall wouldn't leave her mind. Human lover. It was meant as an insult, yet it stirred something in her heart she couldn't name. Was she really growing close to him? Was it wrong to find comfort in someone who saw her as more than a symbol? Her people would never understand. To them she was a traitor already, for choosing peace, for living among humans, for letting the war end without victory. But Ethan, he never looked at her with hatred, never with pity, only with understanding. A gentle knock broke her thoughts. Your Highness? It was him. She told him to enter. He stepped inside, removing his helmet. The soft light reflected off his tired face. You shouldn't blame yourself, he said. People fear what they don't understand. They'll come around. She gave a bitter laugh. You think so? My people don't forgive. They never forget. I'm the reminder of everything they lost. Ethan took a slow breath, then said, Then maybe they need to lose their pride before they find peace. Varel looked up sharply. You dare insult my people? He didn't back down. No, I'm saying they're hurt, just like you. Sometimes pain makes people blind. His calm defiance both angered and impressed her. He was only a human soldier, yet he spoke to her like an equal. No one had ever done that before. Her voice softened. You speak too boldly for your rank. Someone has to tell you the truth, he said, echoing his words from before. Something inside her broke a little more. Something old and cold that had kept her apart from everyone for so long. When he left her chamber, she watched him go, his figure fading down the corridor. The stars beyond the glass wall shimmered faintly, reflected in her eyes. Varel pressed her hand against her heart and whispered, Why do you make me feel this way, human? But the stars gave no answer, only silence. And far away in the dim light of the corridor, Ethan Cole paused for a moment. He looked back once toward her door, his expression unreadable. He knew the whispers, the anger, the danger growing around them. Yet he also knew one truth that frightened him more than any war. He was no longer watching the princess because it was his duty. He was watching her because he cared. And for both of them, that was far more dangerous than any weapon. The palace always seemed too quiet before something terrible happened. That night was no different. The air was heavy and still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Princess Varel sat alone in her chamber, staring at the same stars that had once brought her comfort. But peace had become a fragile dream. Every passing day, the tension in the capital grew sharper. The people whispered about rebellion. Soldiers loyal to the old warlords moved in the shadows. And through it all, one question haunted her. How long before someone came for her life? Outside her door, Ethan stood guard, silent and steady as always. His hand rested lightly near his weapon, his eyes scanning every corner of the corridor. He could feel it too. The air was wrong tonight. Too still. Too quiet. When the explosion hit, it was like the sky itself had cracked open. The walls shook. Glass shattered. A deafening roar filled the night as fire tore through the lower levels of the palace. Alarms blared and screams echoed through the halls. Viral jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. "Ethan!" she shouted. He burst through the door at once, smoke curling around his armor. "We have to move now." Before she could respond, blaster fire screamed down the corridor. Rebels, Lethari rebels, poured through the smoke, their armor marked with the old war symbol. Their eyes burned with hatred. "There she is," one of them shouted. "The traitor princess and her human pet." Viral's breath caught, but Ethan was already moving. He pulled her behind him as a hail of plasma bolts scorched the walls. With calm precision, he returned fire, each shot finding its mark. His movements were sharp and practiced, years of battle distilled into survival. She had seen humans fight before, but never like this. He wasn't wild. He wasn't desperate. He was focused, like a blade guided by purpose. When one of the rebels charged forward with a spear of blue energy, Ethan moved faster than she thought possible. He caught the weapon mid-swing, twisted, and sent the attacker crashing into the wall. But another rebel came from behind. "Ethan!" she cried. He turned too late. The plasma spear struck his side, burning through his armor. The pain ripped through him, but he didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed the spear, tore it from the rebel's hands, and slammed the enemy down with all his strength. Blood spilled across the marble floor. Smoke filled the air. Virel's power flared instinctively, bright silver light glowing in her palms as she pushed back the last few attackers with a burst of energy. The corridor fell silent except for the sound of flames crackling and Ethan's ragged breathing. He sank to one knee, gripping his wound. "You okay, Your Highness?" Viral dropped beside him, her voice trembling. "You're bleeding." "Just a scratch," he muttered with a faint, strained smile. She pressed her glowing hands against his wound, channeling healing energy. The smell of burned metal filled the air as the skin began to close slowly. "You fool," she whispered. "You could have died." He winced but didn't pull away. "Better me than you?" Her throat tightened. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk your life for me?" Ethan looked up at her, his gray eyes calm even as pain shadowed them. "Because someone has to keep watching over you," he said softly. Her heart stuttered. The same words, the same meaning, but now they were heavy with blood and truth. When the guards finally arrived, they found the corridor destroyed, the rebels dead, and the human soldiers still standing, barely between their princess and the flames. Later, as the medics carried Ethan to safety, Viral walked beside him, her hand never leaving his. His blood stained her robe, his warmth fading against her fingers. She realized something then, something terrifying and beautiful. This human had done what no one else in the galaxy ever had. He had made her feel alive again, and as he drifted into unconsciousness, whispering her name, she made a silent promise. She would not let him die. Not now, not ever. The medical chamber was quiet except for the slow, steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Princess Virel sat beside the bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had not left his side since the attack. Ethan lay still, pale under the soft blue lights. His wound was sealed, but his body was weak. The healers said humans recovered differently, slower. They didn't know if he would survive. For hours, she simply watched him breathe. Each rise and fall of his chest felt like a promise she was afraid to lose. Her mind replayed the battle again and again. The flash of fire, the spear cutting through his armor, his blood on her hands. He had stood between her and death without hesitation. No one had ever done that for her before. Not even her own people. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you risk everything for me, human?" But he didn't answer. He only slept, lost somewhere between life and silence. Days passed. The rebellion was crushed. The palace repaired its broken walls. But Varel couldn't bring herself to leave the small, cold room where Ethan lay. When the healers tried to move him, she refused. "He stays here," she ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Her servants exchanged nervous looks. It was unheard of, a princess guarding a human soldier. But she didn't care. She had already lost too much. At night, when the halls were quiet, she would talk to him softly. About her world. About the endless expectations that crushed her spirit. About the way her people now looked at her with anger instead of love. "You said I looked lonely," she whispered one night, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You were right. I didn't even know what loneliness was until you left me with it." Her voice broke. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling its faint beat under her palm. "So don't you dare stop, human. Don't you dare leave me alone again." On the 7th day, his fingers twitched. Varel froze, her heart leaping. She leaned forward quickly. "Ethan?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then clearer. "Princess?" The sound of his voice filled her chest with warmth she couldn't name. "You're awake," she breathed, relief washing over her. "You fool, you almost died." He gave a weak smile. "Didn't I tell you? Humans are stubborn." Her lips trembled. "You shouldn't joke. You lost so much blood. Still here, aren't I?" he said softly. "Guess the universe isn't done with me yet." She looked away, trying to hide the tears welling in her eyes. "You shouldn't have done it. Jumping in front of that weapon. It was reckless." He turned his head slightly toward her. "Would you rather I'd let them hurt you?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. His voice softened. "You're too important, Varel." Her heart stumbled at hearing her name without a title. You can't call me that," she whispered. "Then stop looking at me like that," he said, his tone quiet but honest. Varel blinked, stunned. She hadn't realized how she was staring, how worry and something deeper filled her eyes. She turned away, hiding her face behind her silver hair. "I look at you because I owe you my life," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. "No," Ethan replied, closing his eyes again. "You look at me because you finally see me." That night, long after he had fallen asleep again, she sat beside him, unable to rest. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing his hand. It was rough and scarred, so different from her own smooth skin. But it was warm, alive. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "You're fragile, reckless, and foolish, but you make me feel safe." Her voice broke into a quiet sob. "And I hate that I need you for that." In that moment, the proud princess of Lythar realized something she had never dared to admit. She wasn't just grateful. She wasn't just curious. She was afraid to lose him because the human heart that she once mocked had now become the only thing holding her own together. And as the stars outside glowed softly through the window, she made another silent vow. If he ever watches over her again, she will watch over him too. The palace was no longer silent. It whispered, it judged, it burned with anger that had been waiting to break loose. News of the attack had spread across Lythar Prime. How a human soldier had fought for the princess. How he bled to protect her. To some it was an act of heroism. To others it was proof of her shame. And now the council demanded an answer. Princess Varel stood in the high hall of judgment, her silver robe flowing behind her, her face calm though her heart trembled. The great chamber was filled with the elders of Lythar, each one sitting on crystal thrones that reflected their cold expressions. At the center of the hall, bound by duty, stood Ethan Cole. His wounds had healed, but he looked tired. Still, his shoulders were straight, his gaze steady. He wore no weapon, no armor, only the uniform of a soldier who had done his job and was now being punished for it. One of the counselors rose. His voice was sharp and full of venom. "A human protecting our princess. A human fighting our own blood. This is disgraceful." Another joined in, her tone cutting like glass.
Your Highness, your...
Attachment to this creature has gone too far. You have shamed our empire. The words hit like blades, but Varel stood still. Her fingers tightened around the edges of her robe. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He knew speaking now would only make things worse. The council leader rose. Princess Virel of House Lithar, your alliance with the human species was to bring peace, not to bring dishonor to our throne. We demand this man be removed from your service and exiled from Lithar Prime at once. The words echoed through the hall. Every sound, every breath seemed to vanish. Virel's heart pounded. Her mind screamed for her to stay silent, to obey, to protect her title. That was what a princess should do. That was what duty demanded. But then she looked at him. Ethan stood proud despite the judgment. His eyes met hers, calm and unafraid. In them she saw no anger, only quiet acceptance. He was ready to leave if it meant protecting her. Something inside her broke. No, she said softly. The word froze the entire chamber. Virel lifted her head. Her voice grew stronger. If he leaves, I go with him. Gasps rippled through the hall. One of the elders slammed his staff on the floor. You dare defy the council? I do, she said, her voice clear. You speak of honor, yet none of you were there when the palace burned. You did not see who saved me. You did not bleed for peace. He did. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. You call him a creature, but he has more courage than any of you sitting in your perfect chairs. The room erupted in chaos. Voices shouting, robes swirling, threats echoing. But she didn't care. She turned toward Ethan. You protected me when you didn't have to. Now it's my turn. Ethan shook his head slightly. Virel, don't, I will, she interrupted. You once told me humans fight because they know what losing feels like. I understand that now. I will not lose you. For the first time in his life, Ethan couldn't find words. His throat tightened, and all he could do was stare at her. This alien princess who had once looked at him with nothing but suspicion, now standing before her entire empire to defend him. The council tried to stop her, but she had already made her choice. From this day, she declared, I am no longer just the princess of Lithar. I am the voice of those who believe peace is worth protecting, even if it means standing beside a human. Her words hung in the air like fire. The council leader glared at her. If you walk away now, Your Highness, you will lose your throne. She looked at Ethan, a soft smile touching her lips. Then let it burn. A crown means nothing if it cost me my heart. And so she left the hall, walking beside him, every step echoing through the marble floor like thunder. Guards and servants watched in stunned silence as the Princess of Lithar and the human soldier walked side by side into the light. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, they both knew something far greater than duty or blood had bound them together. It was not war. It was not peace. It was love. Quiet. Defiant and stronger than any empire. Princess Virel sat near the viewport, her eyes tracing the trails of light outside. The cold glow of distant suns brushed against her pale skin, making her look both royal and fragile at once. Behind her, Ethan adjusted the controls. The hum of the engines was the only sound between them. It had been 3 days since they left Lithar Prime. 3 days since she had walked away from her crown, her palace, her people. He glanced at her reflection in the glass. She looked peaceful, but her eyes were heavy, like she carried the weight of 2 worlds. You should rest, he said softly. You haven't slept since we left orbit. She didn't look back. Do you ever stop worrying, human? He smiled faintly. Not when it comes to you. That made her turn. Her gaze met his, sharp yet full of warmth he had never seen before. You keep watching me, she said quietly. Even now when everything is gone. Why? Ethan paused. It wasn't an easy question. Not anymore. Because, he began slowly, back on Earth we had a saying, you don't abandon the people who believe in you. You stood for me when no one else did. You lost everything because of it. How could I look away now? Virel's lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she stood and walked toward him, her robe brushing lightly against the floor. "I never understood your kind," she whispered. "You fight wars you cannot win. You love people you should not love. You carry pain like it's a treasure. Why?" He laughed softly, eyes distant. "Because if we stop caring, then we stop being human." There was silence again, gentle, full, unbroken. Varel reached out, placing a trembling hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. "It's strange," she said. "Your heart sounds different from ours. It's louder, warmer." "That's because it's beating for something it shouldn't," he said with a small smile. Her eyes softened, tears shining under the ship's light. "You mean, for me?" He didn't answer, but the way he looked at her, like she was the only star that mattered, was answer enough. For a long time they just stood there, two souls from two worlds, caught between duty and love. Outside, the universe stretched endless and empty, yet for them it felt full. Varel closed her eyes. "I used to think power was the ability to command armies," she said softly. "Now I see it's the strength to choose your heart over fear." Ethan nodded. "Then you're the strongest person I've ever met," she smiled, small and real. "And you're the most foolish human I've ever known." He chuckled. "Probably." She turned back to the stars. "Where will we go now?" "Anywhere," he said. "There are free worlds beyond the Lithar borders. We can disappear. Start over." She thought for a moment. "A princess and a soldier," she murmured. "Running from an empire. Sounds like the start of a bad story," he joked. "Or a beautiful one," she replied, her eyes glinting. And for the first time in what felt like ages, she laughed, soft and light like music carried through airless space. It wasn't royal or perfect. It was real. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "when I first met you, I thought you hated me." "I did," she admitted. "You were loud, reckless, always watching me. And now?" he asked gently. She met his eyes. "Now I know why." She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You weren't watching me out of duty. You were watching me because you saw the person I wanted to be." Before he could answer, she kissed him, slowly, like the stars themselves had stopped to watch. It wasn't just love. It was understanding, peace, and something bigger than either of them. When they finally parted, she rested her head on his shoulder. "Ethan," she whispered, "if the universe ends tomorrow, promise me one thing. Anything. Promise you'll still look at me like you do now." He smiled and pulled her closer. "Always." Outside, the stars burned brighter, as if the universe itself had blessed their impossible love. Two hearts, one human, one alien, beating together in the endless dark. And somewhere, deep in the silence between worlds, the universe whispered back, humanity was worth watching after all.